Snowy burgers.
Everybody out there, we've done this for here 3 or 4 years. Perfectly.
They're not going to
They've never had that.
There is only one. This is my son. So you know.
All right,
This is Andy Granatelli's private race course around this whole subdivision here. And his former house, you can see through the window, is over there.
Yeah, I remember that. I think we even looked at it.
Oh, yeah. Second highlight is the dark blue box over there. That has
Just a guess.
main bearing journals from Alan fabricated some new ones, welded them in, and we've driven that car.
Well, right?
In the rain at Watson's Glen 2 years ago. Driving to the garden in the rain 2 years ago. We talked with Watson's
Guardrail. I went to 3 driving schools.
Oh, okay.
So I really recognize it.
Really?
I can almost tell
Wow,
what's
that's
out
awesome.
there. Just the one.
So we created this. My goal in life is to get rid of horses. You know, we're modern now. Horse carriages are what we're trying to do. So 5 years ago during COVID, this is my 5th garage like this. We were looking through Google Earth, and I needed a neighborhood, maybe a gated community, because we drive real cars, and I like it when people watch and follow me home, and because they always ask me about whatever that car is. And one of them is our Bugatti, and I figured if it was a bad person or somebody didn't know me, it's just a Bugatti kit car. It's a Volkswagen powered Volkswagen kit car. Well, it's not, but it looks like that. So my wife would always wonder when somebody's following us home, you know, is that friend or foe? They're always friends, but so the gated is better for us. So when during COVID, we came in here and back to the Google Earth story. From Google Earth, I found that gated communities have 6 or 7 big properties on them because of the horse things that Scottsdale does. So we found one in here with a big lot, and then we contacted the realtor and said we would like to offer X amount of money for this house in that neighborhood. It was not for sale. Okay, well, can we give them an offer and see if they'd like to sell it, because we're going to make it carbon neutral. So we did that, and then the lady that had it said, you can't buy my house from Google Earth. You know, you don't even know about my granite tile, my granite countertops, and all that. So it doesn't matter. I just like your property. So from outer space, it will work for what I want. So after about 2 weeks, she finally figured out that we're real. She looked me up, and yeah, you're real. So she accepted our offer, and I said, you can even live in the house. Okay. But we had bobcats we found that were living, this is a big property, 2.5 acres, in the trees right behind where the pool is. She had a little dog, so we videotaped the bobcats on the pool fence and said, so then we got the house too. So that was 5 years ago. And I built this, and to displace horses, there was a corral here and stuff. Well, this is a barn in there, so that's perfect. So a barn is what cars, had to replace 120 years ago. So I utilized the barn and made it a little fancier, added this all on, and this is a bearing truss roof that I designed, so I can that I-beam, I can pull a car back and forth if I want, do my engines or whatever. I did all of this, and that's a 3-foot cube where the lift is. It's a 10,000-pound lift. I can do exactly what I want to do, even though I live in a gated community. And then also, you notice the things in the back. Those are a solar system. The type of engineer I am is electronic, so I engineered a solar power system. Even though we're not allowed to have solar panels in the neighborhood at all, but because it's so high, and because it's got parapet walls, I can have what I want. So that I have 45 panels up there, and I have 30 kilowatts of batteries and inverters. And then I just modified this week. I converted the house to EG4, which means my solar panels go directly into the air conditioners now. So I don't need to use any batteries anymore or any inverters. I still need my inverters for power, but it's a new system because people don't get rebates anymore for solar. So the new system is you get 4 panels or 6 panels and run those directly into the air conditioner, and that's what I've done. So now I will never fret, even if it's the middle of August, I can make this cool enough to have my talks and things. So I just like doing things all the time. So anyway, that's the basis of the building and all this. And then we had to have parking off the street, so I had to park 50 cars in my backyard. Wow. All right. So when did I start doing antique cars? I started doing antique cars in the 50s. In the 1950s, the Arizona Republic, which is our newspaper, that's still in business today, had little ads, and these little ads are for antique cars. They had 1 ad per week, and I collected these. And then every week, and I wrote poems, and I did crossword things. I did things as a little kid in the paper too, but I kept these, and I wrote down the engine sizes and the wheelbase and all that kind of stuff because I really needed to know that as a kid. So I collected these things, and then my grandfather in 1959 decided to figure out where these were all coming from, and he found that these came from the Tad Burness book. So in 1958 or 59, he got me a Tad Burness book, and the Tad Burness book is what the Arizona Republic was using for the content for these ads. And in this book, before 1960, I had created a list on the title page of the book of the cars I wanted. And I got 24 cars on the list, and I've got 17 of them so far. So I've been doing it a long time. So gets you a little bit more modern history. So I was racing the Baja 1000, the Park 400, the Mint 400, desert racing, which was an extremely high adrenaline sport. We did it with Colonel A. Jones, the Mears brothers, Mickey Thompson. We really did it with the big people. That was when it was first starting, and we raced Class 2 unlimited horsepower. But in 1982, we went to the Barrett-Jackson auction, and this guy was walking around in a cape. I thought it was a cape. And he said, win $100,000 racing from Knott's Berry Farm to Indy. Wow, what do you have to have? You have to have a 50-year-old car to do that and all that stuff. All right, so within a couple days, I found a car that I wanted to use for it, and I switched from the Baja 1000 off-road race cars to antique race cars. The good thing for us, the Great Race, which is what it was called then, still called that today, is a time, speed, distance rally. So that is really perfect. I like making things. I built all my buggies, I built all my rails, I built all the off-road things. Also, I won the state math contest for Arizona my freshman year in high school. It was the same year that Bill Gates won for Washington. I won for Arizona, so I won a gold slide rule and a golden lettered calculus book, and I still have the placard with Bill Gates' name on it and my name on it. The only time in history they've been the same. So the time, speed, distance rally is if you are good in math and really good at math in your head, and you like to engineer and work on cars and get them restored well, it's a perfect hobby for me. Perfect. It couldn't have been a better hobby in the world. So what is the Great Race? They were 5,000 miles across the United States. We were the all-time money winners in 1982 to 1992. We won $605,000 racing antique cars. And then that's the paths that each of the races took.
Wow.
You know, so they were 500 miles a day. And to give you an idea, another reason why it was pretty cool to do it, and why it really inspired me to do it back at the time, the first race prize money was $100,000, plus you got bonus money for open cars and husband and wife teams and the oldest car. So we really did good on the prize money when we won. And then to correlate that to another event of the day, the Indy 500 was happening also. And the winner of the Indy 500 would win $300,000. I could win more than $100,000 racing my antique car in the great race. And our $605,000 was equivalent to winning the Indy 500 twice. So you kind of put you back in first person in 1980. So it was a really cool thing. Plus, in 1980, there was 3 TV channels in Phoenix. There was 3, 10, and 12. So when you were doing something good, and when you came through town, and you're leading the race and you're from Arizona, everybody's in line at the Civic Center, including the mayor and the governor, is in the line now, and you're signing autographs. So it really inspired you to go along and do this stuff. So to do this stuff right, I always wanted to enter the oldest car in the race. That's my goal. Always the oldest car. You know, I find out who was going to enter something old, and I get something, and I restore it to be older. How did I know what cars to use? I bought 8,500 books and magazines, all 1915 and older. So I have 8,500 magazines from 1893 to 1915, and hardbacks. I have virtually everything published from America, England, France, and Germany. So when I do a restoration on a 1903 race car, say, I'll get the 1903 race car, I'll tear it all apart, and I'll get 100 of my periodicals and my hardbacks from 1902 and 1903. And that's what I use to keep myself in first person to do the restoration for that 1903 car for the race. And I just, you know, and I would catch myself once in a while in the first few years. Sometimes I would fudge and go in my library and get a 1904 magazine or 1904 hardback. But then I find out, oh, it had another gear in that year, or it had a bigger displacement. No, don't look at those. You're in 1903. So I really tried to do things in first person on my work. And so when I kept to that, we did really well, and we won the great race 2 of the times, heads up, which means no bonus points whatsoever. We had the best time of all the cars, no matter what year they were, because we really wanted to do good. And it's my wife and I doing all the time. And the pictures that you'll see in the other room, back in the 70s, even, are my wife and I racing everything that we raced and competed with. And she was a corporate accountant, so she was good at writing down all the numbers. And I was good at calculating in my head all the parameters for all the turns and accelerations and all that, which makes a rally exciting and challenging and awful to other people that don't like it. Okay, so we'll go back to this room again. So what this garage is for, you know, I won maybe 1,000 trophies in the last 50 or 60 years in our events, but when we created this room, we only kept the ones for the great race as kind of a roof trim to give people an idea that we really like to do that. But the other trophies of things that we won, you know, we may have kept a few of them, but not too many of them, to bring this into light as far as what it really means to me on the mechanical stuff and the historic stuff. So to the room itself, all my stuff is, I try to work in first person, and I try to work in first person with the real stuff. So this is a table, just a table. But this table is September 1906. It's dated on there. This weighs 1,006 pounds. So it's 120 years old, and it's a machine layup table. So a machine layup table means it's flat. But you know, all tables are flat, but this is really flat. So these are grind lines. These shiny lines that go across here every 1 inch, these are grind lines for a file. So a machinist would take a file and dress the table before you start each project to make sure that the table was flat. And why did that make any difference? Because if you're trying to machine a part, and you're trying to, you know, you have to start with some basis, and this is 120 years ago, and you have a dirt floor. You know, this is flat within 1/10,000th of an inch. This is flat within 1/10,000th of an inch. This weighs 7 stones, which is 96 pounds. But this, 7 stones is nothing at all to move on this because this is totally flat and this is totally flat. And you can't even hardly lift this. I mean, it's really heavy. Yet, since it's totally flat, it's totally flat. So what is the use for that? So here's a piece of bill of material, say. So you could say a person 120 years ago put that bill of material next to the square of the table and your 7-stone square, and you would see a gap either on the top or the bottom to know if it was square or not. And how accurate could simply a table be and a chunk of steel? An old timer back then, with a kerosene lamp behind it or a carbide lamp behind it, could see 9 to 15 millionths of an inch of gap by looking and see the light either on the top or the bottom. So a simple table, and a giant steel brick is as accurate as any laser system we have today. Yeah, maybe they're more accurate, but this is amazing, and that's the basis for your work. And then also a proper table has no vise mounted to it. It has nothing mounted to it. So when you use this table, I roll it to where I'm going to roll it to use it. If I'm going to watch the Olympics on TV, I'll roll it over there, and I'll do my project, and I'll clean it completely off when I'm all done. Anyway, that's kind of neat for a table. Another thing, a tool, that vise on the counter there, it looks like a normal vise. It is, except it's 115 years old. That's a Bugatti factory vise. So that's from the team from the Bugatti factory. That's worth more than a car, the vise, but it's a perfect vise, so I use it every single day. This morning, or last night, I cleaned up the filings that were around it because I use it. And if you wind that vise out to this far, there's not even a 1,000th of an inch of play. The vise is perfect. And then the table back here is my wood table, and the vices around it are 1900 or 1895 and 1910 or so too. So I try to use the same tools as much as I can. And I do have a laser cutter and a laser engraver over there on the restoration, so I do have some modern stuff. And then my lathe and my mill are old school lathes and mills. They're NC controlled, so I can still make things accurate with wrist pins and all down to about at least down to 2,000, 2 10,000s. Okay, so now we get into the historical part of it. What's this mess on the side here? This is my 1907 French Rolls Royce. This would belong to Tsar Nicholas. It also belonged to Bill Hare. It also belonged to Steve McQueen. It also belonged to Buddy Deakins, who did the Great Escape and jump over the fence. And I got it from Buddy Deakins' brother when Buddy Deakins passed on. So I'm rebuilding the engine on that. I got it already done right now. And as soon as probably this week, I'll put it back in and put this back together. So that's the big green car. That's the only car in there that doesn't run. As far as when the cars were going to be adapted or adopted by the public and the political people, you have to have a lot of things that were working out to have any new invention work out. So Europe had industrial revolutions twice, where we had one. Europe had really infrastructure to make cars. They had families that have done something for 20, 30 generations, and they lived in the same house for 20 or 30 generations. So European cars were 5 to 7 years more advanced at the beginning years than American cars were. So Europe had lots of cars by 1900. America didn't have any cars in 1902. In 1903 is when they first started. The first Ford, the first Cadillac, the first Packard was 1902, 1903. And it wasn't until 1904 that they could go more than 25 miles an hour. But in Europe, in 1900, they already had cars that could go 25 or 30 miles an hour, and maybe a couple of them would go 35 miles an hour. So the way they got cars to be adapted or adopted by the public, you got to have the public happy, you got to have the manufacturers happy, you got to have the politicians happy, you got to have the animals happy. They were called road walkers back then. The birds, now they're called road runners. It happened because of the car. They had to cross the road faster. So James Gordon Bennett, he owned the New York Herald. He never had a driver's license. He created a race series in Europe called the James Gordon Bennett Racing Series. So the James Gordon Bennett Racing Series, he had to satisfy all those people, all those groups of people to make everybody happy, to further the automobile. So we created a race series. So the race series was in a closed course. So the closed course was not the Indy 500. The closed course was you raced through 5 or 6 villages, and you repeated race through 5 or 6 villages, and you kept doing that. And that's how the first races were. And then, so the way that worked was, here's a triptych lithograph from 1901 from the James Gordon Race Series. It's real. And then there the townspeople is waiting for a car to come by. And the cars came by every 5 minutes because they had no dust control. They couldn't race car to car because the roads weren't, the roads were this wide and that wide. Most of the roads were very narrow. So to keep things safe, they one at a time, and they timed them. So then they're waiting for a car to go by, and then there's a car going by, and then there is where it's crossing inside the city. Inside the city, when it reaches the entrance of a city, the timer in the city would hit this watch. And this is a regulator watch. And this is 1901, and it's got a picture of an empty car on it. It's real. And what a regulator watch is like a railroad watch, except instead of having the hands on top of each other, the hands are never on top of each other. So you can absolutely make sure that the time you write down is right. There's no stop action. And this is the same watch or clock used in the car that the writing mechanician would operate. So these are pretty cool watches, and they're both working perfectly. So this was part of what you had for your instrumentation for doing the race. And then as you were clocked in, and then you were pushed through the town or drove through very slowly, in the 1 mile of that village, and there was no steam cars in that competition. They were all gas and hydrocarbon cars. So every one of these postcards is from that race series only. And you can see in every picture, there's only one car in each picture as they're driving by. And most of these have been sent. So, for example, that's the champion crosswalk, the crossover the road course. That's the Dunlop, that's the tire changing pits for the tires. Tires lasted 100 to 200 miles back then because they were real rubber. This is one of the finish lines, which is a beautiful, it's almost like a castle finish lines. And then this is one town or village. They created a spectator situation. So the spectator situation was they would charge the spectators to sit in half of the horse track. These are all people in there. And then they would charge them 5 cents or whatever the charge was. And this was the ticket that you had on your lapel, giving you that seat so you could watch them go by. And then that was really exciting to people because James Gordon had figured out how to keep everybody safe, all the manufacturers happy, all the political people happy, so it kept progressing. The problem is it really progressed. When you have no limitations, things progress extremely quickly, especially if you have the infrastructure to support it. France, which is where most of the races were, had straight roads because of Napoleon in 1903. England had all the curvy roads. So the perfect place to do all these races, and most of them were happening in France. But by 1905, the cars had gotten to this powerful. So when I get done, you can come back and see this. In 1901, baby buggies. By 1905, there were big Ford 6-cylinder cars that would go 70 miles an hour. So there's one. There's 2 or 3 of the pictures in here of really powerful cars. We have one of those in the other room too. And the one we have in the other room will go more than 90 miles an hour. And in no time whatsoever, they really perfected. So I'm going to show you another car that happened in 1906. They changed to Formula One in 1906. They figured out in 1905, by having no limitations in what the constructors would do, the cars were just going to get faster and faster and faster, and they just do that by making the cars bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger motors. But that wasn't developing the car at all, because these cars were not for sale to the people, because nobody could start a 700 cubic inch 4 or 6-cylinder car, even though they had the technology to make it. There was no road system that would handle it, no suspension system, no width system on the roads. You couldn't make the car advance anymore with the race team just putting bigger monstrosities on the road. So they created a series called Formula One. And Formula One is when they created a bunch of rules for 1906. And these rules were, okay, let's go back down to 1 cylinder. Let's go to a 1-inch bore in the carburetor. Let's go, all these restrictions. And then they did that So then, in 1906, the first year, when they had, again, the restricted cars, one cylinder, limits on everything, people were starting to use technology to make cars faster. So I have the winningest Formula One car in the other room, which you'll see in a few minutes. It'll go more than 70 mile an hour with one cylinder. It's got it's an overhead valve. It's got twin spark plugs for the cylinder head, one on each end of the cylinder head, so you don't have to advance the timing very much. It has independent front and rear suspension. It has no transmission. It has a pinion. It has 3 pinions and 1 ring gear. So you engage a pinion into the ring gear, or you engage the second pinion into the ring gear, or the third pinion into the ring gear. So you only have one gear making contact with one other gear. And by having the seat, the riding conditioned seat back at a 45-degree angle, make it aerodynamic, and all the other things it did, and it runs on methanol alcohol. It's 70 mile an hour, and it's a tiny little car for Formula One. That's how Formula One started. Formula One, once that happened, the development for cars really took off. And even a Formula One today doesn't have much more than a 1500cc to a 2000cc motor. But look at the technologies they have advanced because of those limitations. So we'll talk about that when we get in the other room. So another kind of fun thing is, all the cars back then, this was a race accessory that was really important. So every car had, 50-foot of rope, of hemp type rope, because if there's horses, they can pull you out of the ditch. If you can't make it up a hill, if you slide out, if it's snow or you get in the sand, this rope took care of all kinds of things. So that's a real set of rope. This is kind of neat. Back then there was no helmets with your blood type on it, and there was no, you didn't have any helmets or any seatbelts anywhere anyway. But they used religion to show how dangerous things were, I think. So this is what a lot of racers would have. This is the St. Christopher medal on the bottom, which is the safety of passage. But on the top is something really neat for a racer. So this one team would wear this, or one person would wear this, and there's a lot of these that are different. I have some other versions too, but this one I like a lot. So I'll read it to you. It's only about 2 sentences. The owner of this car is a Roman Catholic. In case of an accident, please summons a priest. There's no ambulances yet. There's no hospitals yet, really. I mean, not where you're racing. And if you wreck your car, well, better get a priest. So, also in the James Gordon Race Series, every year they would have a race series, a national championship. So a national championship would mean the winningest company from whatever country could field 3 cars. So this is a flag for one of the countries. So what country is this from? Okay, so this is a 1865 Corvette flag. A Corvette is not the Corvette fiberglass car that we have today. A Corvette was a very, very fast race boat that the military had. So by having your flag this small, you didn't tear it up too much. So all of the cars had pennant flags. So this is a pennant flag. So you'll also see in the Formula One car, you see a Nürburgring pennant, and you see an oil company pennant from back 100 some years ago. So again, no stickers on the side, they had the pennants. And the pennants were like this, but only a foot long. I mean, that was your sponsors, and you'll see that in a minute. So that's kind of neat. This one's kind of getting torn up, so I'm not putting it on the car. And then the last thing is, this is a goggles that the racers had, and there's 50 different kinds of goggles back at the time. And I wear a set of these on my Bugatti when I race it. But all of these have an origin too. So the origin of goggles, I think, came from these. So these are 1871, and these are called hoodwinks. So these are great, takes care of the rocks and the V's on the side, and then the only problem is, it's hard to see through them. So these are hoodwinks. So why are these hoodwinks? Because if you enter a secret society, the Freemasons or any of those, you're going to be outside the building. There's going to be people inside the building with cloaks on. They're black and they're like Ku Klux Klan, except there's a little slot, but they're not. They're just hiding their identity. They're not doing anything. So when you go in the building, there's a dozen people sitting in there with their cloaks on, and you have your hoodwinks on. And then when you get in there and talk to the people, you'll find that maybe you recognize one of the persons as the postal, inspector, or the mercantile owner, or the blacksmith, and then they keep interviewing you, and after a while they decide, okay, open up your hoodwink. So a hoodwink is you open it, and then you can see everybody in their clothes. And then you talk to them some more, and if they decide that they like you, they'll take their clothes off and see who was allowing you to join their secret society. What the racers would do, they would put glass in the hoodwinks, and then have a dog. So that was the basis. So this is 170 years old or so. Everything kind of comes from somewhere. So flying really happened in 1908. In flying, what does that mean? Is you start with a heavier than air machine. You start the engine up on it. You're not on a railing system. You're not going down a hill into the wind. You're on flat ground, and you take off on this heavier than air machine, and you fly a square mile or something like that, and you come back and land. And that was 1908, the first time that the public actually got to see airplanes actually fly on a condition that could be normal condition. So that when that happened, again, postcards of that day, all of these postcards were given out within 6 or 8 hours at the same time in 1908, and these are all of the pilots of the day, the most famous people, and most of these are autographed. And then what they would do is, at 2:30, this person here would take his airplane and would take off and do that procedure. And half of them got it done. All of these postcards are, again, most of them are autographed. Most of them have been sent. The stamps are on them. So I'm really proud of that too. And for an airplane situation, I bought a new airplane 10 days before the celebration of flight when I wasn't a pilot. In 2003, I went to Western Aviation because I wanted to do my solo and celebration of flight. And Wright Brothers did their first flight, and I talked somebody into getting me ready. I told them I could learn it real well. It was a new airplane I bought, and I did that celebration of flight exactly 100 years from when the Wright Brothers did theirs. And there's a picture of when I did my solo there, and then I just like history really has a big impact on it. The last thing in here is there's a Bugatti in the other room. It's the oldest Bugatti Grand Prix car in the world, and it's probably the second oldest Bugatti that runs, or maybe the oldest one that runs, period, even not a race car in the world. And then for me, for a restoration person, I restored it. I did all that stuff. And you have an antique car kind of, but then when I got it done, it got done running well enough that I did the International Bugatti Grand Prix at Watkins Glen, and that's me racing my Bugatti. And that's the finish line with all the Bugattis in the race. And there was 22 Bugattis from all over the world that had been flown here. And they said it was between $1 billion and $2 billion worth of Bugatti cars on the racetrack. So it's a really neat honor to do modern things with antique cars too. So it's an antique car. It's a 110-year-old, 12-year-old car. But I can race at Watkins Glen in the fog, in the rain, slide around the corners with other Bugattis like they did back 100 and some years ago. So I continue to live, in present and in past, and have a fun time. So that's what that stuff is. 50 miles an hour, and people online say, Alan Travis ruined a multi-million-dollar Bugatti, and then the people who probably say, yeah, but he's the one that restored it, right? So within a week, I had already machined a new axle.
Dad, which one do you want to sit in? Look at that. So no.
Yeah,
I like that one.
I don't know. Sometimes
It'd be like
I don't know. I didn't hear.
Yeah, you're a fan.
People see you do it.
You look good.
He'll set the exposure for you.
That's funny.
So and also.
Yeah, I guess you can.
And then he'll say, if you put that in your State Farm, it's going to be $10,000 or $15,000 in your insurance. Why don't you just add your automobile? And also, the real reason it's an automobile, it's got a differential, so it's not a tricycle. A tricycle does not, you can't turn a tricycle. So this It's got a differential. Okay? So when you drive this, if I give this to somebody to drive, and we get it going for them, you go down the end of the driveway, I say, when you get to the end of the driveway, turn the handlebars. You're going to go that way, turn the handlebars. It's got a differential. You know, if you've had experience with ATCs in the past, you had to, if you want to turn that way, you had to put your butt on this part of the seat to turn and all that kind of stuff. This is an automobile. Okay, so why would this be the oldest production motor vehicle or automobile in the world? It's the second oldest in the world. Things happen. You know, one thing happened in 1893, we had pneumatic tires. They had pneumatic tires for a while. The second thing that happened to make this an automobile is we went from batteries that were wet cells. So in that was your 1860s and 1870s, the two glass jars. Those are wet cell batteries. The ceramic white and blue battery is also wet cell. That's from the 1870s. But what happened to make batteries portable was the telephone. So dry cells were really, really important for automobiles. So in this automobile, we have dry cells. So by having these, we had a portable electrical system. That was really important. Okay? But we also didn't have any fuel. So in 1896, there was no real gasoline, or what people thought of gasoline was kerosene. Kerosene has no fumes. Kerosene you can't ignite unless you just literally light it on fire. You know, it's non-volatile. Non-volatile mixtures will not make combustion happen. But dry scourging places in 1896 were blowing up. And that was exciting to the engineers and to the inventors of the automobile. So by having dry scourging places blow up, which are called dry cleaners, the chemicals that were blowing up was the hexane and the hemptane and the petroleum ether, those fumes. So this vehicle runs on hexane, hemptane, and petroleum ether. So they hadn't invented carburetors yet. So what they did on this vehicle to make it run, they have what's called a surface carburetor. So this big triangular box, the bottom of this box, has about an inch of these three chemicals in the bottom, and it creates fumes. So the fumes are the top 90%, the bottom is fluid. And as you pedal this, the poppet valve sucks those fumes in, and the exhaust pushes into this triangular box, and that's what makes it run. So it runs on only fumes. Okay. Also,
There's no ignition.
What's that?
There's no ignition there.
Well, kind of. There's no ignition, but there is ignition. In the other room, there's a Rykov coil patent device. I didn't show it to you, but it's on the bench in there. The Rykov coil was what they had created in 1855, and that's where they had 1,000 turns of wire wrapped on a ferrite core. And by putting 4 volts on this winding, and by disconnecting that lead, you create a secondary spark, but you don't have a primary coil. You only have a coil, you don't have a primary and secondary in your coil, you only have the secondary. You only have the 1,000 turn windings. But when you disconnect that, it created a spark. And that's on that bench in there. I haven't played on this before like this, but let's see what happens. Yeah, love the horn. Uh-oh, may have had the ignition on. Well,
Did you kill your batteries?
maybe. Let's see what it does. Okay, so we started a 130-year-old vehicle in 10 feet and started running. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And then once it starts running, you close the compression release, you adjust this and you adjust your timing, and you're going down the road. You know, you're going down the road, if there's nothing to compare you to, you're going too fast. So Amazing, but I guess my battery lasts. So I had my ignition turned on, but apparently the points were open when the ignition was on, so it didn't turn the battery down. Yeah. Hardback books. I created a race from London to Brighton, and then he invited 20 vehicles, which is probably all the vehicles that they could find. 13 of them were coal and steam, and 7 of them were hydrocarbon. So the hydrocarbon vehicles were these. So that was the first race of the London to Brighton rally, and they did that. They didn't kill anybody, and they repealed the red flag, red lantern law. So then the speed limits became 15 mile an hour. And 15 mile an hour was fast enough that you could go 40 mile an hour. Nobody's going to catch you to tell you you're speeding anyway. There's no horse, there's no radar. But they had to get rid of the 3 mile an hour because a policeman could find you on his bicycle at more than 3 mile an hour and give you a ticket or whatever they were going to do to you. So this is, I've done London to Brighton 3 times. And then I did it on this vehicle. And this is me in England in November of 5 years ago, doing that 80-mile event. I also did it in my 1898 Jean Perrin, the DC red car there, and there's a picture of us in front of the same London Castle thing.
Oh, yeah. Big fan.
Yeah. And the third time we did it, we were the guest of Lord Montagu. And then Lord Montagu was like King George. There's been King Georges back 100 years or 500 years. But the Lord Montagu that we rode with was simply the son of the person that did it in November of 1896. And we did that race with him in 1990. And that was an honor of all honors. That was really, we didn't realize how much of an honor that really was. So we're car number 7 on the London to Brighton. Well, we're the oldest production vehicle there is. How come we're not car 1? Because the first 6 cars were steam and coal powered vehicles. So I'd pass all them. So we did that. So we won't talk so long on each one now, but
Okay.
this is one kind of the last thing here. This is this racing and board tracks. So and that's what's going 45 mile an hour. And I do have the hop-up kit from 1897 for this, which I'll be putting into the summer. And it's dated 1897 on my rod, which is really cool. And that person there was Charles Sherratt. So I have his hop-up kit from 1897.
Wow.
So that's an honor to have that hop-up guy, probably the oldest hop-up kit in the world. And I'll be putting in the oldest production vehicle in the world. So this goes about 25 mile an hour. It does have a Roots supercharger in it, and the Roots supercharger is driven by a belt on the a leather belt on the flywheel. And the supercharger, the pump for the supercharger is a Keystone blacksmith centrifugal pump that the blacksmith would use to heat up the coal. So you can look at this later, but that's the supercharger, and this is the plenum for the supercharger. And then what Roots did, Roots was an accessory company back in 1900, and Roots had all kinds of accessories for vehicles week. And there were beautiful magazines, large print, lithograph covers, and all kinds of things to make you excited about this new far-fangled invention that you could buy into. You could have one of these for yourself. So you would, if you were a farmer and you lived 1,000 miles away from where automobiles were at all. So say you lived in Oregon or Washington or California, there's no manufacturing of automobiles anywhere near you. So if you're going to buy a car, you would buy a car and you would kind of analyze your purchase. You couldn't go downtown to see anything. There's no cars whatsoever. There's no roads downtown. There's no gas stations. There's nothing at all. But you're going to buy an automobile from the same kind of company that you were used to. What could you be used to? A tractor company or a wagon company. So Studebaker made wagons. Mitchell made wagons. Packard made wagons. So you could find a wagon company that you might have one of those wagons on your farm, that you might have been dealing with that company. So in this case, in this scenario, this farmer decided he's going to buy a Mitchell automobile because he has a Mitchell wagon, say. So he's going to look at his magazines like I just showed you. He's going to find the ads, and the ad is You can't see it, but it's right there. That's the ad for this car. It was $750, which is about $40,000 back then ish, compared to money today. And then
Hey Ken, do you remember using that?
so, and this was bought by trappers and by Indians and by military people, and it's still a really good tomahawk today. If you need a tomahawk, it's still, I'm sure, just as really good as it was. But so Europe had tomahawk technology and car technology and airplane technology and silver trophy for a race. So then they got 10 professional, correct, proper race cars from Europe. They had them all come over, like the big Renault is. And then they raced at the Empire Track in Yonkers, New York, and that was an actual picture from that race. And that was a horse track the day before, and it was a car track the day of the race. And then a proper car in those days always had 2 seats in it, a driver and a riding mechanician. The riding mechanician would always ride on the inside of the running board to keep the car down if it's going around in a circle. Also, the person riding on that running board would look fore and aft, find out if his car is coming, because there's lots of dust and maybe he's a little bit higher, maybe he could see a little bit better than what the driver could. He would also adjust the oil and pump the gas. He would also change the tires. He'd also push start the car. So he was a pretty important person. So the riding mechanician was important. So there's 10 cars that were qualified to do the race from Europe, and then there was another car that came over that wasn't qualified, and it came from America. And Henry Ford had commissioned the car. It was a car called 666 or 999. Henry Ford commissioned this car with a single seat and a big tiller. It's at the Henry Ford Museum right now. And Bernice Oldfield bought that car to race that race to win the $5,000 in gold and the 27-pound trophy. But they wouldn't let him race it because it's not a legal car. So the Europeans did the race, and a 1903 Mercedes won. And I don't have the $5,000 in gold for the prize money, but I do have the 27-pound trophy that was awarded that day in first place, and that's over there on the orchestrion. And it says 1903 on it. And Albert Poole won the trophy. Barney Oldfield was allowed, that's what he changed his name to race his car with his big tiller. And then he was allowed to go around the racetrack without the European cars on the track. And he went actually 7 miles an hour faster. But all my magazines of the day said, not that he went 7 miles an hour faster necessarily, but he never went straight. Every corner, he would throw the car sideways on every corner. And it's not proper. First American to do it, no Europeans ever did that. Barney Oldfield developed that day, maybe by accident on the first corner, but he continued that. So Barney Oldfield became the most famous racer of all time in that short period of time, another 5-year period of time. And then, to give you an idea how famous he got, Barney Oldfield was nobody that day. He really wanted to earn that trophy next to my orchestrion. But within 5 years, Barney Oldfield, because of his state fair things he did by racing airplanes and everything that he did, was the most famous racer in the world. And not because he did races, because he did spectacles. So in 1908, the first time that a automobile was depicted as far as art was when they made this sculpture. This sculpture is a Czech artist, and the Czech artist made 115 works his whole life, never made 2 of one thing, only made 1 of each thing for museums. I got this from the Czech National Museum, and what this artist did, he made things like it's famous, it's that kind of art. So he made two of these, 2 depicting automobiles. One was a 1913 Bugatti, which we have that car, but we don't have that statue. But I have this, and this weighs 168 pounds. So it's kind of a neat thing, but everything kind of happens in a 5-year period of time. A nobody, most famous racer. Cars that couldn't hardly go to 70 miles an hour. Airplanes that couldn't take off to airplanes that could fly and turn off and land and fly upside down and drop bombs. So this is a pretty important piece of art from Barney Oldfield. Single cylinder car. So the thing is interesting about the car, I explained it a little bit in the other room. It has twin spark plugs on the cylinder head. So both ends of the cylinder head is a spark plug. So why is that good? It's because the flame takes a while to go from one end of the cylinder head to the other. So by having one on both ends, you don't have to advance the timing so far. And by not advancing the timing so far, you have more torque in the lower end. So it gave you a couple different things. Plus it has overhead valves. It has no carburetor with a butterfly in it. So there's no butterfly in the carburetor. It's full throttle all the time, no gas pedals. So how do you control a car with no gas pedal and no butterfly in the carburetor? So they were restricted to 1-inch bore. So by having no butterfly, that means you have no bolt going across there and you have no mechanism flipping back and forth. So what they did was, to control the throttle, you're controlling the camshaft load. So what this does on the sector, this controls the camshaft lift and advance for the cams. So your control for speed is on this. So the camshaft lobe weighs about 2 pounds for the intake lobe. The intake lobe has 60 thousandths of an inch lift at the bottom, which is nothing. And at the top, it's 650 thousandths of an inch lift, which is more than a NASCAR. So, plus it advances the camshaft lobe 27 degrees as you twist this. So if I start it, it sounds like a Johnny Popper tractor at the bottom. I mean, it's just like a tractor. You advance it to the end, it's a NASCAR. It's unbelievable. And it's a single cylinder car that you can go down the 101 freeway with. It's just amazing how they developed that. And I can give you a ride in this where you don't know, I have no control, I have no throttle, there's nothing connected to the carburetor whatsoever. And it runs on methanol alcohol. And the methanol alcohol is in here, and it holds 5 gallons of methanol, which isn't very efficient. You get about 16 miles per gallon. And then also you have leak detectors, so you know if you have a leak in your methanol tank. You have these 2 kerosene lamps on the side. So if this rivet right here is leaking, this lamp will let you know that you have a problem. Because you'll see a flame trail for about a quarter of a second. You'll see a little bit of flame, and then it explodes. But if you so you wouldn't normally mount kerosene lamps to a methanol alcohol gas tank, but that's what you do. This other gas tank isn't gas, it's oil. This is a total loss race car. So once he starts the car for me and changes the tire and adjusts the oil, adjusts the gas, he's useless. I want him to not slow me down. So he's at a 45-degree angle.
Oh, yeah.
Again, a race car.
Right.
So they just thought of everything. Also, it has independent front and rear suspension. So this race, Targa Floria, was the national champion for Targa Floria. And Targa Floria is like a Baja 1000. So I've got pictures of this, one picture of it 3 foot off the ground, because it's got independent front and rear suspension. It doesn't have to slow down on corners. But to give you an idea how the mix of the technologies go, this is a wooden frame race car.
Right.
It's metal clad, but it's wood.
Just noticed that.
It's wood. Yeah, this goes down. It's fast. Thank you. I'll show you. So
That's what year? 1906?
06. It happened just after that series. And I know the grandson of who made the car. That's who made the car. My car is the second one. He made 9 of these for 1906, the race cars. This is the pennant that I was talking about in the other room. This is the oil company pennant. That's how they did their sponsorship. And then this is from the Nürburgring, the pennant, original one of those. And then original badges and things from 1906, 1907, the racing. A racing license back then wasn't a piece of paper. It was a bronze, beautiful, so that showed, oh, you're good. And then the lights, well, before I took the lights, the instrumentation is you have a clock here, because you're racing against the clock. You have a tach that goes to 2,500 RPM, and you have a speedometer that goes to 100 miles an hour. You also have, when you start the engine, this is your primer kettle. So there's no accelerator pump on it because the carburetor only has 4 parts. It has a giant straw in the float chamber, and you have to prime it. So there's a primer cup on the top of the engine. You prime that, and then you hand crank it, and it'll start. But even the primer kettle is beautiful. It's really ornate, and there's a spot for it. But then when you race this is at night, and this has no electricity to it. So you race it by putting carbide in your lamp. Mm-hmm. And your lamp, this holds half a gallon of water in your lamp. And it's a Rothschild lamp with triple lenses. So it's the most expensive lamp, the technology you could possibly have. but they race 24-hour races. So this carbide goes in the side here. This is a canister of it, and that was enough for 8 hours worth of light. And it created acetylene gas. And so you had acetylene light. And then, so it's kind of a bomb. And that's her grandmother's initials on it. And inside the cigarette case are her grandmother's last non-smoked 1913 cigarettes. So we got the color right. So another family thing that really didn't include the family, but included somebody else's family, and it meant a lot to her and a lot to me to get these. So now the story is complete. So if we ever do that video again with Jay and I, we can have the right cigarettes. I do the International Bugatti Grand Prix events, and then on those events, there's 40 of us that show up from all over the world, and Bugattis are some of the most valuable cars in the world. And then there's always advertised that, usually the last one was, let's see.
Potato.
And it hasn't been started for quite a while. It sounds like a Harley, right? Everything in here runs, except that one because the engine is on the floor. Carbide.
Yeah.
But if I do the carbide like I did at the Ford Museum this summer, it's going to be lit for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. Basically, once it's on, it's on.
Right, and it holds so much stuff and so much water. So I've done a few fudge factors because I drive them everywhere.
Well, yeah.
But the things I have done, and I put.
you.